Welcome back, strangers. Today we're going to discuss the Black Knight satellite conspiracy theory that claims NASA is covering up the existence of a 13,000-year-old alien satellite that orbits and monitors the Earth. The theory goes that in 1899, Nikola Tesla, the famous inventor and electrical engineer, intercepted radio signals unlike any of the natural radio sources on Earth. He believed the signal was coming from an intelligent life on Mars using radio waves to communicate using a number system as their language. In 1927, Jørgen Hals, a Norwegian engineer, was experimenting with radio signals and discovered some of the signals would echo back to him several seconds later. He could not explain the delayed echoes, but Black Knight enthusiasts believed that he was picking up signals that were being bounced back from the alien satellite. In 1954, UFO researcher Donald Keyhoe told newspapers that the US Air Force had detected signals coming from two potential satellites orbiting Earth, despite there being no known man-made satellites in orbit yet. In the early 1960s, Time reported that an unknown object was discovered to be in a polar orbit around Earth. This unexplained object was supposedly monitoring US and Soviet satellites that were in an equatorial orbit. After the report was made public, the US Department of Defense announced that this unknown object was simply a piece of the Discovery 8 satellite launcher that had been drifting in space. Duncan Lunan, a science communicator and science fiction author, attempted to determine the origin of these mysterious radio waves that Tesla and Hals had encountered. He determined in 1973 that the signals were messages transmitted by an alien probe that had been sent from the star system Epsilon Bootis that had been lurking near the moon for the past 13,000 years. The most cited and recent evidence of the existence of the Black Knight satellite comes from the 1998 STS-88 encounter. The crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour photographed an unusual object in a low Earth orbit. However, the famous photographs are of an object that are not in the theorized polar orbit of the Black Knight satellite. However, NASA claims that this unknown object was only a thermal blanket that had been dislodged during a previous EVA mission. The Black Knight theory has always fascinated me. The idea that a 13,000-year-old alien artifact is watching over humanity like the monoliths of the 2001 Space Odyssey is so amazing and oddly comforting, knowing that not only are we not alone in the universe, but instead we are being watched over by a higher species. Sadly, it more likely appears that the story of an artificial alien satellite may only be a combination of many unrelated stories. The name Black Knight comes from a British rocket program that was developed to test re-entry vehicles from 1958 to 1965. This project never put a satellite into orbit and is only related to the Black Knight satellite theory in name only. None of the original stories relating to the theory used the term Black Knight in their first publications. Brian Duncan of the Skeptoid podcast believes that the mysterious radio signals that Tesla discovered in 1899 were the result of pulsars, caused by highly magnetized rotating neutron or white dwarf stars that emit a beam of electromagnetic radiation that can be observed when the beam is pointed at Earth. The unknown object in polar orbit in the 1960s that the US Department of Defense claimed to be debris from Discovery 8 may actually have been the first Corona spy satellite that was put into a polar orbit to spy on Russian military complexes. Duncan Lunan, who originated and helped perpetuate the ancient alien probe or satellite theory, later retracted his conclusions as unscientific and made with outright errors.
In our continued amazement, UFOs are continuing to grip our imagination. Though in the today and now, there are far too many objects being classified into the same category that we generally consider to be of alien origin. But in the early days of the space race, we can now look back at captured images and consider them to be the smoking guns of otherworldly visitors, either actively monitoring the Earth or by robotic means from afar. The Gemini 4 UFO captured by Jim McDivitt in June 1965, for example, could be interpreted to be that of the legendary Black Knight satellite, which was first monitored by Nikola Tesla in the late 1800s. But if this photo was not enough proof, even with astronaut first-hand reports of a UFO, then consider this photo that you may find interesting. This has remarkable similarities to the object observed and photographed in space, and it came from underneath the sea. The images of the UFO snapped by the USS Trepang SSN 674 were taken in March 1971 somewhere in the Arctic. Some authors argue how the objects seen by the crew of the USS Trepang SSN 674 are similar to the objects snapped in space by the Gemini 4 crew, raising questions whether there is a possibility that astronaut James McDivitt actually saw the same object in space. It is thought that the USS Trepang were actively tracking the UFO in a deliberate effort to attempt to intercept the object, and the photograph it clearly shows a submerged object coming out of the sea with enormous amounts of water being displaced. The rear of the UFO appears first before it makes an adjustment to the front nose end and becomes airborne, possibly to go into orbit to monitor the Earth. So there must be something under the ocean that it is protecting. Could this be the Black Knight satellite? Is it here not to protect us on Earth, but to protect whatever is submerged under the ocean? These photographs were apparently leaked, and they are no doubt impressive. Other similar photos can be found of objects over the sea, but can also be dismissed as secret Navy operations to develop special craft. What makes this one so impressive is the size of the UFO, the way it moves and hovers before accelerating. You must consider that cigar-type objects, as reported throughout history, and even today, including in space and including by government officials across the globe, may in fact be one of the same objects that has been protecting the Earth for thousands of years. Consider the deciphered signals that were intercepted from this object in the 1800s and early 1900s of the constellation Bootes. The signal was how this constellation would have looked 13,000 years ago, suggesting this is how long it has been at Earth orbit. Could this be an alien probe that originated from the Epsilon Bootes system? The San Francisco Examiner wrote about the satellite on May 14, 1954. The Time magazine wrote about it on the 7th of March, 1960. Here is what they said about it. 3 weeks ago, headlines announced that the US had detected a mysterious dark satellite wheeling overhead on a regular orbit. There was nervous speculation that it might be a surveillance satellite launched by the Russians, and it brought the uneasy sensation that the US did not know what was going on over its own head. Anyway, we just wanted to bring these leaked photos to your attention. Let us know if you think there is a link between the separate incidents, and thank you for watching.